Labrīt visiem, kuri pievienojušies mums šajā pavasarīgajā dienā uz SEB rīkotās uzņēmumu izaugsmes programmas nu jau 7. kārtu. Šo kārtu mēs organizējam kopā ar inovāciju konsultāciju uzņēmumu Helve, bet līdzīgi arī kā iepriekšējās kārtās, arī šoreiz mums ir paredzēts 6 publisko lekciju cikls, kas saistītas ar biznesa attīstības, pilnveides un izaugsmes tēmām. Protams, arī, ka šajā tādā nenoteiktības un nestabilitātes laikā mēs saprotam, ka uzņēmumiem, uzņēmumu vadītājiem ir diezgan daudz operatīvo jautājumu un procesu, kuri ir jārisina, bet tomēr mums ir liels prieks, ka, neskatoties uz šo situāciju, ka tomēr lielākā daļa no uzņēmumiem tiek tiešā vai netiešā veidā ietekmēti ar ģeopolitisko situāciju, ka tomēr ir gana daudz uzņēmumu, kas tomēr arī strateģiski turpina domāt par savu attīstību, kuri saprot, ka tāds krīzes laiks tāpat brīdī ir arī iespēju laiks. Un līdz ar to mēs šoreiz arī programmā esam uzņēmuši 13 enerģiskus, attīstīties un augt gribošus uzņēmumus, ar kuriem mēs strādāsim kopā visas programmas laikā, kopā ar mentoriem, lai palīdzētu viņiem attīstīt savu biznesu straujāk un tālāk. Bet tad šodien arī mūsu pirmā lekcija, kas veltīta izaugsmes ambīcijām un produkta tirgus sadarības atrašanai. Tā kā mūsu šīs dienas lektore arī lekcijā runās angļu valodā, tad es arī pašlaik pārslēgšos uz angļu valodu. So our today's guest mentor and guest speaker is Vicky Brock. Currently, Vicky is already developing and working on her 5th startup, 5th company. And she has also received various prizes and nominations as most inspiring women in tech. And she's living somewhere between Scotland and Estonia. And Vicky has a ton of experience and a ton of energy she is actually willing to share with us today. And I will pass the mic on to Vicky in just a second, and she will tell us more about her path, her experience towards the ambitions, towards some maybe failures and lessons learned as well. So we don't have to repeat them. And as usually, I'm inviting all our viewers to put their questions in Facebook comments section or also in LinkedIn live stream comment section. And we will be addressing these questions at the end of the lecture. So with that, Vicky, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned energy and experience. And as I gain more experience, I realize just how important energy is. And as I have got older, I have had to make the effort to maintain my energy levels. So I'm going to talk today about building on the right foundations, whether that is building your startup, building your new product, developing something inside a larger company as an entrepreneur, which is hugely challenging, and I know something that many of you are experiencing. But what I have learned over 5 startups is that it's an awful lot easier to get it right at the beginning or at a phase when you are going into a new stream of effort that may take you many years. It's easier to get it right at the beginning than it is to make course corrections halfway through. And believe me, I have done a number of course corrections halfway through, 3/4 the way through, and 95% of the way through. And coming into this business, my 5th company, I have tried to make an awful lot of effort to get it right from the start. And I have very much put into practice some of the processes that I'm going to share with you today in order to make that whole experience slightly less painful. So I'm going to cover with you a little bit of a personal story, which I hope will demonstrate both who I am and why I'm going to talk to you about building on the right foundations. It's because I didn't do it in a particular business, and it was a deeply expensive and painful process. I'm going to share with you the 6-step process I really use in real life when I start my products or my companies, and that I encourage others that I'm mentoring or working with to use when they are at a starting point, whether that's internal, external, or an actual startup. Then I'm going to talk about the most skipped process in the whole world of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, and that's validation. Not do you think it looks cool? Do your friends think it looks cool? Do your investors think it's really cool? But actually, do the people that you intend to buy this think it is world-changing? This is the step everybody skips, and I'm going to talk about this because it is the step I will never skip again, because the process of skipping it was really very, very painful. And then I'm going to talk about this concept of product market fit and what it feels like before you have it and after you have it, and actually what you can do if your company simply isn't growing as in the way that you expected it to, or your product just isn't taking off and setting the world on fire like your business plan said it would. And then I'm just going to finish up with some life lessons from a middle-aged entrepreneur, which I hope will have some resonance for you somewhere along the line, including the most important lesson, which I'm going to say at the very beginning. It is okay to walk away sometimes when you have to. You get exposed so much to the never ever give up message, and sometimes for the sake of your health, your family, your financial well-being, and actually the longer term health of your company, you need to know when to walk away. And I'll put that up front because I think it is important. So this is little me. I was the first person from my family to ever go to university. I come from a rural part of Norfolk where there are probably more sheep. I'm starting to think in Estonian. More sheep and turnips and carrots than there are people. And I had an ambition from being the tiniest child that I was going to go to London. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got to London, but that was the extent of my ambition. And I was very, very into computers. I had to learn to program because I'm really old. And in the olden days, computers really did look like this. This was my computer. And you had to get a magazine and type the code in and press run, and then your game wouldn't work, and it was like soul destroying. Or if it occasionally did work, it would look like this magnificent, my absolute favorite game, Twin Kingdom Valley. It would look like this, and you would be dazzled by the potential of the future. But I learned some very, very valuable skills, which meant that when I went to university, I was able to charge my fellow students to type up their essay on my wonderful free computer that the university had kindly provided me. And that kept me, not only did that keep me in beer and wine for the whole of my time at university, it was still probably the most profitable business that I ever founded. And then this is me all grown up, with lots of makeup on when I was a dragon on BBC TV Scotland, Dragon's Den, which was very, very good fun. But I very much am an entrepreneur out of economic necessity, and I would say it's in my DNA. It's all I know how to do, and it's what I'm very good at. But I wasn't exposed to any business people as I grew up. And so I've had to do a lot of learning as I go. And I'm very interested in the process of what worked and what didn't work. And actually writing that information down and distilling that information and keeping a record, so that I learn, but also so that I can share some of that information in sessions like this, because not only is it immoral not to share your experience of what you learned, it's also really inefficient. Life is too short to keep making other people's mistakes over and over again when you could learn from them and just shortcut some of this process. The reason that I'm now on my 5th company, 2 and a bit years into my 5th company, is I tend to think in chunks of 5 years. It doesn't mean to say I won't be with this company for more than 5 years, but it's just I tend to think in that type of cycle. I'm a good starter. I'm a good launcher. I am way less interested in a steady as it goes company that runs for another 30 years. But I also understand some of the challenges people working in that environment to keep things innovative. And I find it very useful to work with people in corporates or in entrepreneurship, because the skills exchange helps me develop. So I'm going to tell you about company number 3 very briefly. I started Clear Returns in 2012. It wasn't my first startup. I had a successful consultancy style business. My husband and I had founded a web analytics business in the north of Scotland, and we'd done very nicely. It was profitable. It gave us a salary. It was a very, very small company, and I couldn't see how it could grow. And I was very ambitious, and I wasn't happy in this little company that nobody had heard of. I wanted to do something dramatic. I wanted to do something that would grow. And I was at this time on the board of another startup, a US-based company, and I'd been on the founding board, and people on that board of directors with me, they'd sold their companies to Yahoo, to Microsoft. There was somebody from eBay. There was somebody from Expedia. I was surrounded by very successful men in tech, and they didn't seem that much smarter than me. In fact, I shall share my ego with you and say I am not completely sure they were any smarter than me. But they were clearly working a process that I didn't understand. And I said to one of them, I wrote to him one weekend and said, I have an idea for a company, and I just don't know how to start. I don't know how I can build something when I've got no money. I don't know how I can create something that I will need to spend for a long while before I ever make any money. And this is very new to me. And he shared with me his thoughts and his experiences, and he distilled it down into a few rules that gave me the confidence to start. And I had an idea. The business that I built turned out to be very, very different, because I followed at least some of the process that I'm going to share with you, which is my process, not his. He shared some very specific things with me about growing a tech business at scale and how you maintain and grow the value of the company, which I actually did very well. So I created Clear Returns. Within 12 months, we had won IBM Smart Camp. We were everybody's darling. And in fact, we'd won some really big tech prizes before we'd written a line of code, and that should have worried me. It didn't. I didn't understand at that point why that was possibly a problem. But we raised money. We raised some more money. I spent all of my time pitching, speaking at conferences, going out selling. Investors loved us. If I was in the room with retailers, they loved us. We got lots of shiny trophies. We got lots of noise. In 2014 or 15, we were named top tech startup in Europe by the European Commission. And in 2017, I was fired as CEO and walked away from the company. Lost all of my money, couldn't work for a year because of restrictive agreements, and had a very, very, very brutal experience that I didn't really understand. And because I couldn't work for another year, I couldn't start another company, I couldn't employ the same people, I was told, oh, you'll never raise money again, you know, nobody will ever work with you again, which was complete rubbish. It actually, when I sat there in my pajamas thinking that my life was over, I've never received more emails from VCs asking me if I had my next idea yet and what I was going to do next. But actually, I'd gone from working 7 days a week, 15, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I counted it up. I think I'd done 20,000 hours. It was extraordinarily unhealthy, but it was also necessary. And now I was sitting in my apartment, which I painted. Like I painted the entire apartment by hand myself. And I read a lot of books. I wrote a blog. I thought very, very hard about why did this happen and what will I do differently. And at the end of that year, I still didn't have my next idea. But what I had found was the people that I wanted to work with and the processes that I was going to work through. And it didn't take very long at all for the idea that has become my latest company, Vistalworks, to manifest itself. And interestingly, the idea behind this company wasn't mine. I didn't sit there reading my miserable books, writing my blog, painting my ceiling, and come up with my next big idea. What I did was find the people that I wanted to start a company with, the type of business I knew I could do, the skills I had, some of the values that were important to me. And then the idea presented itself in the form of a government innovation challenge. The Scottish government asked, could technology help reduce consumers' exposure to online illegal trade and dangerous products? And I thought, wow, I know how to do this. This is a different application of tech that I've built before. I understand this and I've got the right people ready to go. And we spent 12 weeks essentially doing the process I'm about to share with you, at which point we decided, yes, there's a market. Yes, we've built a really rough product that works. We should do this as a business. And our stakeholders agreed, and they wrote a check that funded us for the next 12 months. That doesn't tend to happen on your first business, by the way, that you can kind of pre-fund the development of your company. But it happened this time around because we all knew not just what we were doing, but much more importantly, why we were doing it. And we focused on the step that I skipped before, which was validation, validation, validation at every key decision point. And now I'm in Estonia. I'm in Tallinn. Obviously, the last few years, the world has changed dramatically. We were under a year into our business when COVID first hit. I had just come back from the United Nations in Geneva, where I'd been at the Global Illicit Trade Conference that the UN runs. And I came back from Geneva with the worst flu of my entire life, and was in bed for 2 weeks. And when I kind of came round from what was probably an early dose of COVID, I suspect, the world was completely different. Our office closed, and in our office in Glasgow closed, and the building never reopened. I thought my business is dead before it's even started. I didn't know how we were going to survive. And then online crime, which is the world we work in, crime very quickly led the way. Crime moved online overnight. People who'd been selling drugs on the street were now selling them on Instagram and Craigslist. People who had been selling dodgy products in a market were now selling them on eBay. And we were all working from home at the start of a pandemic, and our business went crazy in a good way. And we just kept building, validating, releasing. We built this checker that you can see on the left of my screen, the high risk warning. That's a browser plugin that works in the UK, which was released in 6 weeks from idea to release. It was using our background, data and scoring algorithms, but this was released very, very quickly in order to identify fake COVID testing kits, fake sanitizer, dodgy drugs that were being sold as COVID cures. So it was almost like we stopped thinking too hard and just acted and acted and acted. And then eventually came back up for breath when 6 months later, the entire team and certainly myself were absolutely exhausted. During this time in the UK, we had this little thing called Brexit going on, which I didn't think would happen. But our client base is law enforcement agencies, regulators, people working in compliance, people who enforce the rules, and most of those, whilst the UK was in the European Union, those rules were set at an EU level and then implemented nationally. So I had been worried that if Brexit actually happened, we wouldn't be able to trade with the 27 other countries that represented our client base. So I had become an Estonian e-resident, and I'd set up an Estonian company as my backup plan, because I really do like to have options. I like options in a business, other market segments, other ways of doing it, other places to run, because I don't like being cornered. And so we'd set up our backup Estonian company, and then just after COVID, during 2020, it became very apparent that not only was Brexit going to happen, but it was going to happen in the most potentially destructive way to our business. So my husband, who's one of my co-founders, and I decided that we would move to Estonia and get the Estonian EU company set up so that we could keep trading in multiple markets. And we're still here. We arrived just as the second wave of COVID hit and all of the flights between the UK was cancelled. So even if we weren't committed to being Estonian, they cancelled all the flights for the next 5 months. So we became Estonian, whether we liked it or not, got our visas, rented a flat, started to learn Estonian, and have made our home here, which I didn't see coming. But all of this has been because I think at the beginning of this business, I distilled what I learned before, validated the idea, and built a company at every stage where I was opening up options as opposed to closing them down. So that as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a founder, and as a team and as a product, if there's a catastrophic shock in one part of the market, we should hopefully be able to adapt to the extent that we can work another way. And I think, we all know what's going on in the world around us, and it's a frightening time. But I think building yourself options builds yourself both stamina, resilience, choices, and then, at least for me, the world becomes slightly less terrifying. And there's little bits and pieces that I can control, and there's little bits and pieces that if this fails, I'll do that. And, for me, everybody thinks differently, but for me, that's incredibly helpful. And the good news is this pre-start process, and ideally it is pre-start, but frankly, as I say, I've done this 95% of the way through clear returns when I realized I'd spent 5 years and several million euros, an embarrassing amount of millions of euros, actually. And I still didn't have product market fit. And I had built a really cool solution that couldn't be bought by the target market, but the people that could buy it didn't want it. And we had fantastic technology, a great product. We'd won lots of awards. Everybody thought we were great, except the people I needed to sell the product to. I actually did a version of this product, did a version of this process then. I presented that strategy to my board of directors at the time, which is like, yeah, we need to kind of change direction. In fact, I made the mistake of using the word pivot, which did trigger one of my board directors to try to reach across the table and strangle me. But fortunately, they couldn't reach. It was a big table. So what is this mysterious process? Well, it seems so simple, and it is simple. I've done this with 11-year-old girls and 14-year-old boys who can't make eye contact with another human being and still come up with really great startup ideas. And this is what it is. It starts with the problem. Where's the problem really? Is it a problem worth solving? And when I'm working in a workshop, and some of you are going to be doing this later, or I'm working with other people, I do this as a dialogue. I get the person just moaning. I hate it when it's so annoying that, life would be so much better if I didn't have to do X every day. 11-year-old girl, I really hate it that I can't talk to my dog when I'm at school all day. I really hate it that my sister spends so long in the shower. All of these things. This problem discovery is where it starts. Now, you may think, not every business starts with a problem. Like, I make cakes. What's the problem behind cakes? I make music. What's the problem behind music? But actually, these are problems of the soul. Like, I feel rubbish, and I wish I could have a beautiful, beautiful thing I could just enjoy in the moment and remind me that life is worth living. I mean, hell, if that's the problem your cake solves, that is a great solution, because that's existential. Reframing what you're doing and why you're doing it in terms of not just the problem, but almost like the most human, soul-touching expression of that problem. You might be thinking, oh my goodness, I like have a B2B software product that, you know, plugs into Excel to make people's graphs prettier. What problem could I possibly be solving? Well, I mean, ideally you would think about the problem first, as opposed to try to retrospect your product to a problem. But actually, think about that one through. Somebody has just gone into a meeting to present their population's COVID statistics. This happened in the UK. They're using Excel. They've actually reached the row limit. Believe me, this happened in the UK. They've reached the row limit of an Excel spreadsheet. So they think there are only 440,000 cases in their health area. And they go into a meeting, they present. This winds up being presented on TV. False statistics are produced because nobody could just quickly visualize the data and go, whoa, there's a big gap in that data. It like just drops off the cliff. Maybe we did our sums wrong. The risk that you kind of lose your job, waste your money, don't solve a national level problem because you failed to present your data correctly. Now that is a problem worth solving. It's really important. But what I tend to find, again, particularly when I do this with children, are great and imaginative. Students, not so much. And then business people, if they feel confident to let themselves go, become imaginative again. It can be, when you go through this process, the problems are very narrow. And this is natural. You're going to look around you. I go, oh, I hate that my pen makes my hands covered in ink. And I do. You know, I hate it that the people downstairs are playing ping pong, which means that I've had to do this call from this little meeting room with no air. You know, your life is full of little trivial problems, but there are good ones in there. And the next couple of steps, 2 and 3, who else cares? And who'd commit cash for a slight improvement? This indicates whether you have business potential. Because if the only people that care about the whole ink on the hands is me and like one of you and perhaps 2 of our friends, there's probably not a business in this. Who cares? Who else cares? And this is an exercise you can do at any stage in your business. Who else cares about this problem? Who else? Who else? And if you really keep lifting up of what problem you really solve, I need joy in my life, you know, I need something that gives me hope. I need to not look stupid when I'm standing in front of my peers. And if you're lifting it up, who else has this problem? This is where your market segments come from. This is where your whole markets of operation come from. And this is where the important concept of your beachhead market, who you do first, comes in. Because who cares enough to be like our clients in this business and go, you know what? I'm convinced. Here's an upfront payment for you to go and try to make the current reality less bad. Who would commit cash for a modest improvement? Not the fairy tale change the world vision that you have in your head that will take 20 years and, you know, involves Elon Musk putting in $1 billion or 2, but actually who right now cares about this problem enough that they would commit a little bit of something, ideally cash, to make it slightly less terrible. If you get number 2 and number 3 right, basically you have a business. This is all about the market part of product market fit. Number 4, do we have the skills to know where to start? Not do we have the skills to build a fully crafted solution. We are not thinking about solution or product yet. We're only thinking about problem and market. Do we know the skills to know where to start? Now, I have 100 business ideas a week, and I have 20 before breakfast. Most of them are stupid, and some of the ones that are actually really good, I am not the person to start that business because I have no idea what I need. I would like to build something that just blasts rockets out of, blast weapons out of the sky. I don't know how to do that, right? I don't know where to start. I would like to build something that means, I can slow down the aging process because I'm kind of at that age where it matters. I don't know where to start. These are not the businesses for me. And I do sometimes get to step 4. In fact, I frequently get to step 4 and go, yeah, this one's not for me. But with VistalWorks, my current company, I was like, hey, yeah, like this is a data business. This is software. I know how to start this company. End of thinking about the product. It's just, do I know the team I need? Like broadly, the skill set I need to start. Then we go back into the imaginary world. For the people who care, for the people who would commit the cash for the modest improvement, what does solved actually look and feel like? And this is where the word, these are soft words, feel like. I could take look out of this sentence and it wouldn't matter. What does solved feel like? Because this is then actually the feeling we need to achieve with what we build and all of our next steps through. And this is what I got wrong in Clear Returns. I understood the problem. The problem was shoppers bring back their clothes. What I didn't do is match the problem to a solution where people would be chasing me down to give me money so they could get their hands on the solution. And that, unfortunately, is what product market fit feels like. I thought problem, returns, skills. I can do data businesses, build a data business. The product solution fit wasn't there. In this business, I see potential customers leaning into the screen, emoting about this will let us do something. I mean, one of our existing clients was telling me the other day about, I can't really talk too much about what we do, but they were talking about that they'd managed to get some prosecutions in an area of online trading crime where we'd identified it was going on. They had acted and now that was off the street. And, this was emotional. The world was better. And our stakeholder was feeling that. And I honestly think that ultimately solution is a feeling, not a product. Product comes next. But when you start the company and you start planning through what you're going to make to deliver that feeling and all the value that goes with that is what you do next. But at this point in time, we're still conceptual. And number 6, right? The least work. I have made the mistake, and I see founder after founder, whether they are external entrepreneurs doing a startup or intrapreneurs going, okay, I've had this, I've done 1 to 5, amazing. Right, now I need lots of money and I'm going to go and build this whole thing. I can't do anything now until I've raised money. And I made that mistake with Clear Returns. I went and raised money to build something that wasn't the solution to the problem. And I should have built something in Excel, built something in PowerPoint, done a little data example where I worked through the numbers and said, look, in your product catalogue, I've found this one dress that's costing you X amount of money. Here we go. Would you pay me to tell you about more dresses? And they would have said, no, probably not, because we've already, committed to making them. And I wouldn't have done that company, at least not in that form. I heard a talk by some successful until they got, I'm trying to find a polite word and I can't, ripped off by their investors. They built a really successful American online gambling business where you could bet on sports. And in the beginning, they made their business on an Excel spreadsheet, and people paid to play this game on an Excel spreadsheet. And it proved to them that there was enough people willing to pay every week to play a game where you betted on the sports results. And then they started a company. And you can do this on paper. If you're going into the beautiful cake business, if you can have a lovely picture of your cake. You can have an example. Would you like this cake delivered to you every 2 days? Would you like this cake customized to have your best friend's face on it? You can do all of this without starting a bakery. And this is the point. This is where you start. You go into your process of building a product, startup, company, thinking validation, assumption, validation, assumption, validation. And the validation isn't like a great theoretical exercise. The assumption is, look, I think people might be willing to pay to know that 75% of their dresses are going to get returned. Assumption. It was an assumption. And, 5 years later, I was in a meeting with the retailers going, your dresses are returning at 75%. You could reduce that by 2 percentage points and save more money than growing your sales by 26%. And they all turned around and said to me, how do we grow our sales by 26%? I could have learned that before I started. Not that I'm sore about that. Hey, just don't make the same mistakes twice. So yes, validate as you go and do not skip this stage. I have I went to MIT on their Global Entrepreneur Development Program, which is a wonderful program. I was midway through Clear Returns, so a lot of what I learnt, at the time I felt it was too late for me to adapt. I was wrong. I could have done, but I didn't. And my professor there was Bill Owlett, and he was developing at the time, and he's now published this process called the 24 Steps of Disciplined Entrepreneurship. I love this. I follow it. Well, at least kind of, I probably follow it through to about, well, actually, no, all of these steps are important. And I did just say, don't skip this bit. This comes after the 6 steps that I've just told. This is like when you're actually, okay, right, you know what? This idea works. There's people that are prepared to pay for it. This is what you do next when you're actually getting into the nitty gritty of what's our business model going to be. What the functionality, who's our target market, who are we going to do first? Who will our first 10 customers be? What's important to them? This is the absolute nitty gritty. And Bill has distilled all the research and entrepreneurs' experience over many, many years and come up with a 24-step process. I'm sure there are others. I like this one and I follow it religiously. When I'm at the ideaing phase, my house or my office gets covered in these You know, my office and house gets covered in these mind maps and problem statements and who else has the problem. You know, I do this stuff, and some of the stuff gets really gnarly. And if you're in the middle of a business already, you might look at this and go, oh my goodness, I haven't ever calculated the total addressable market size. I would argue, however painful that is, it's worth doing before you're running out of money or got investors trying to fire you, because that will give you an indication of whether your market size is big enough to support what you're doing. And if your market size is not big enough to support what you're doing, that's okay. You haven't hit the wall yet. You've got time to think about other market segments. You've got time to think about other geographies. You've got time to think up and down the supply chain. Actually, we've been focused entirely on consumers, but is there a business to business aspect to this? So unless you've got like 2 months money in the bank and you're about to get fired this afternoon, she speaks from direct experience. There's always time to think about some of this stuff if you've never looked at it before. Step 17, the lifetime value of the customer. And 19, the cost of acquiring the customer. You know, there are businesses out there existing entirely on VC funding because the lifetime value of their customer is less than the cost of acquiring their customer. And if they do not fundamentally change the business economics, they don't have a business once the VC funding goes away or economic circumstances change. So I honestly encourage you to validate quickly and cheaply on paper, in English, they call it airware, which is just kind of like visuals, PowerPoint presentation, stuff that looks like it exists but doesn't. You know, photographs, a mock-up, just like one. People are able to bring their imagination into this. If they have the problem and they care enough, they can bring their imagination to this. You do not need to build a worked through functioning app. You know, you do not need to build a production line. Cheap, quick. Validate to de-risk, to challenge an assumption. Don't use it like a drunk uses a lamppost. You know, the light is for illumination, not to hang on for dear life to. Don't use the validation process to confirm whatever you believe. You can twist data any way you want. But the point is to try and challenge your assumptions and evidence them away. Be careful who you listen to. Your friends, your family, potential investors, they do not reflect your target market. You know, your friends and your family probably think it's stupid, but they'll tell you it's great because they like you. You need to talk and listen to the people that you actually have identified as your target market. A couple of conversations, of phone calls, some Zoom meetings, whatever. Be careful who you listen to and listen more than you talk, because it's very easy to go into a conversation where you are trying to learn, and instead of listening, you try to sell, and you go, I've got this great idea. It's the best thing ever. It's going to change the world. Like, it's going to make your life so much better. What do you think? It's a brave soul that says, I think that's ridiculous. Particularly when you are charismatic, enthusiastic, full of energy, as so many entrepreneurs and founders are. So try to shut up and ask them about the problem. Ask them about their working reality. Ask them about what solved would look like. Don't tell them. I do not think you can outsource this. Step 6. Tip 6. I don't think you can outsource this process. I think you should be on the call. You should be doing the call. At least you should be participating in the call. You know, you need to see the look on their face. You need to hear where they hesitate. You need to see and hear and judge for yourself whether they're telling you what you want to hear or whether they're getting fired up. And I know that that's so vague, and I am a trained researcher and analyst, and I would never be doing commercial research based on, do they feel fired up to me? And this is why I don't think you can outsource it, because that's not a research technique. And yet you can tell. And again, it doesn't have to be a sexy thing. Everything I do is unsexy B2B software. People can still be fired up when they imagine how the misery of their working day is going to be relieved by this potential solution. And my bar, when we came into VistaWorks, my bar was, I want our product to be so good, so valuable to our end users, that if they can't get the budget from their boss, they'll pay for it themselves. And we're in B2B because they have to feel the value. Otherwise, we're not going to get renewal. We're not going to get, we're not going to get the retention that we need for the business to make sense. And by setting that as one of our early bars, what we do have now is incredibly good peer-to-peer recommendation. And we're working in we're working in some niches. Everybody knows each other. I would never find their contacts. I could never do outbound marketing in the way that you would do consumer marketing. Unfortunately, so far I don't need to, because they do peer-to-peer because they're getting value and they want to champion it and tell their colleagues. And that's because I very deliberately set that bar at, I want them to pay for it themselves if they can't get budget. Yeah, perfect. And in every form of life, perfect is the enemy of good. If you spend so long going from 95% to 98%, it's a complete waste of effort, right? Good enough does in most circumstances. When I'm talking to children particularly, I put this in terms of a bridge. What do we need when we build a bridge for the bridge to be good enough? Well, we need it to meet in the middle. Big point of the first bar of the bridge is, does it meet in the middle and not collapse? Great. We probably want to put some railings on the side so the cars don't fall off the bridge. We probably want to put some lines down the middle of the road so the cars don't clash by driving head into each other. Do we need to paint Leonardo murals on the underside of the bridge so that the ships can enjoy the view when they go under it? No, we probably don't, at least not on day one. Do we need all the road signs on the bridge on day one? Probably not. Do we need to have painted all the railings on day one? Probably not. Perfect is the enemy of getting anything done, and that's really true when you're at validation and research and evidencing stages, because people really enjoy doing research. A lot of people really enjoy doing research, and it can be a really good excuse to avoid actually doing anything. Good enough, move on. So yeah, it's pretty my homemade things I've already shown you. So these are some books. I'm just throwing these out here. These are a couple of books that I really like. So Bill Owlett, Disciplined Entrepreneurship, and the Disciplined Entrepreneurship Workbook, which is actually the one I use, which has all these things that you fill in. Who will my next 10 customers be? What is my beachhead market going to be? Where you kind of work it all through and write it down and keep a record as you go. Also, it's quite an old book now, but it's really useful. The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which is about being customer and problem orientated in everything that you do. How do you build for a market? How do you build for a user? How do you build for a customer? Create a startup or a project or a product orientated around growing customers as opposed to building tech for the sake of tech. because it's quite old, most of the video material and stuff around Steve Blank is a bit creaky. But actually, he was the person that Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup, which is also very old now, and the stream of things that came out of that was influenced by Steve Blank, and it's very interesting, and I feel has stood the test of time. I saw him do a talk at the end of last year, and this made the hair on the back of my neck stand up because it was so relevant to how we were trying to build our business. Then there's two other books you may have heard of. I'll go for The Goal first, which is so unsexy. It's quite an old book also. This is about the process. This is about the theory of constraints and how do you set up your resources and processes in a way that you get what you need to get done. So unsexy. But if you're building a restaurant, if you're building something with a production line, if you sit in supply chains, if you're manufacturing anything, doing any kind of physical goods, The Goal is a wonderful book. When you can get your head past, it's a bit weird because it's a fictional story about a man who works in a factory. It's really good. It kind of blows your mind about how you have to do things in a certain order and how there are bottlenecks in the production process, and you can't just move something from here to here and get the same results. It's super interesting. And then the final book that I recommend you have a glance at, especially for all the CEOs out there or the founders who found themselves with the job title CEO and think that they've been messing up ever since, and think that they are the worst CEO in the whole world. This book explains to you that being a CEO is basically constantly having to choose between the terrible, the cataclysmic, and the absolutely awful. And it explains to you that the bar is really low and you're a high achiever and you're used to being good at things. And from this point on, you're going to be bad at things. This is kind of like the manual of how to survive being a CEO without having a nervous breakdown. How to fire people the right way. How to make mass redundancies the right way, how to cope with running out of money the right way. This is a good book. I recommend it. I really do. And that last book, Ben Horowitz, brings me on now to the concept of product market fit. You may have heard of this. It's bandied about a lot. It's kind of a tech startup software-y concept, but I think if you pick it apart, it's useful to other businesses too. It's, in short, are the people that you're supposedly building this for seeing the value? Will they buy it again? Keep buying. I read a quote where, well, actually, during Clear Returns, I was getting near the end of my time in the business. I had tried and failed with 3 different sales directors. I was back in charge of the sales department myself. I literally had built a sales war room where we had got the lists on the wall and were doing the outbound calls, and I had my sales targets the same as everybody else. We had sales training. I didn't know why we weren't closing the deals. And one evening I Googled, what does product market fit mean? I remembered hearing it, but I couldn't really remember what it meant. And this is what I found, actually. I found the Mark Andreessen quote. And the Mark Andreessen quote here, product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market. I was in the market of department stores and retailers. Our biggest client had just gone bankrupt. Our second biggest client had been bought. When I started, there were 50 potential big enterprise buyers of our product. When I finished, there were about 10. And that was because of the economics of the market. You know, we were targeting physical department stores, probably the worst suffering business sector of the last 10 years, 20 years. And we were not in a good market. Not only were we not in a good market, there wasn't another market I could just flip this technology to. I mean, we could try, and we did, with pure online retailers, but the pure online retailers were a little bit better at thinking about dealing with returns than the more recent ones. And I realized all I'd been thinking about was product, and actually we were in a terrible market. And this quote goes on to say, if you do not have product market fit, the sales cycle is sluggish. You probably have fired several sales directors. You've tried marketing, you've tried outbound, like nothing seems to work. And your renewal rate might be low and people are just, If you have product market fit, you can't service demand quickly enough. You make the mistake of underpricing. You have more business than you know what to deal with, so you make mistakes of prioritization. You start to fail to deliver on the contracts that you're getting because your operations aren't in place. It feels like your world is on fire. Like, not having product market fit feels like your world is drowning. Having product market fit kind of feels like your world is on fire. I was drowning. We were drowning. And so I didn't really pay attention to this other quote. And I've put a link here where you can, there's an interesting article that pulls all of this stuff together. But this compelling value hypothesis, this comes back to the 6 steps I was talking about at the beginning. What does sold look and feel like? How is their world going to be better? Do enough of them want it? And yes, companies go through many iterations before they find this, if they ever do. I tried to take clear returns on a cycle, another iteration cycle. I personally was out of time. It's very hard to do this late in, particularly when you don't own as much of your company as you did, or you're just one person on the board. But ideally, you know, you would be getting here before you would be mindful that product market fit is a tenuous thing. You don't have it just because you've been doing this for 4 years. You don't have it just because you've sold some products. In fact, I would say it can be quite a distraction. Your early sales tend to be made because you have a charismatic, compelling, energetic founder or entrepreneur or founding team, internally or externally. I use entrepreneur, but it very much could be intrapreneur. You've got somebody who's living, breathing this, and they radiate energy and enthusiasm to the extent that you can make early sales. The problem is that that's really hard to replicate with the sales team. It's really hard to replicate that with the next wave of employees unless the compelling value is there. I mean, if the value is there, you can do a bad sales demo with a creaky follow-up material that you did in Word, and things will move on because they have a problem and they want your solution. And, you know, as long as we can just agree on price and legals, fine. But it often takes a lot of iterating there. And I I wish I didn't agree with this last quote on here. I wish I didn't agree with it, because it underplays our specialness as founders and our competence as entrepreneurs. But if you have a market that really wants what you're doing, then you can mess up almost everything else and still succeed. Brutal, but true. If the market doesn't want what you've built, it doesn't matter how good what you built is. You either need to find another market or come back to your solutioning. It's normal not to have stock product market fit. As a startup or as an internal innovation project, you exist to validate that you deserve to continue to exist. When we founded VistaWorks, we said we just had a little agreement between the 3 founders. We're going to work for 3 months, and at the end of the 3 months, we will decide if we deserve to exist. We continue to have, it was originally 6 months, it's now tends to more be yearly board meetings where we decide, do we deserve to continue to exist? Is there any point in continuing to exist? And that shouldn't be a frightening thing, because it takes some of the all or nothing fear away. Because the most annoying thing that anybody ever said to me, and unfortunately it was my chairwoman and former best friend of Clear Returns, this isn't personal. We're firing you, but it isn't personal. Of course it's personal. When you're a founder or a super early stage member of a company or product, this is you manifested this thing. When somebody criticizes it or doesn't buy it, it's personal. But if you can find ways to manage that as an individual, like we're following a process, we need to validate whether we continue on this path. It actually depersonalizes it for you. It doesn't become so all or nothing, succeed or fail. It's just iteration. And if we had our next board meeting and the other 2 founders go, you know what, we've taken this as far as it can go. There is no commercial valid rationale for this business to continue to exist. This wouldn't feel like a failure. It would feel like, you know what, we did a really great job and it's run its course. That might sound hard to believe, but I genuinely mean that. If, like I, at Clear Returns, have my moment of going, oh my God, there's this thing called product market fit. We don't have it. We're screwed. What do you do next? This is influenced a bit by how your business is funded. The more shareholders you have, the more external money you have, the fewer choices you have in many ways, because those people bought into your plan. For you to turn around and go, I sold you shares in this company to do this plan, but yeah, I was wrong. It is not a surprise that they want to try to strangle you when you say that. And it's very different where, like, you're in the position that my founding team currently are, where we haven't really raised external money. That was a deliberate choice because I hadn't recovered from last time. We are the shareholders. We can sit around the table and make that decision between us. So what you do when you discover you don't have product market fit depends, I think, on 3 things. How much money you have left in the bank. Money left in the bank equals time. The more money you've got left in the bank, the more time you've got to do something about it. How your company is owned, who the investors are and what your relationships are with those investors. And then essentially the nature of your market. So what we did next, and I would really recommend doing this, is first stop spending money, like any money that you can stop spending, including your lovely sales team and your lovely product team. Stop spending money. And the point of that is to buy you more time, to last what you've got a little longer. You can't spend your way to product market fit. It doesn't help throwing more salespeople at it. In fact, that's almost the worst thing you can do. You can't spend or sell your way to this. This is about market and your match to the market and your value proposition. It's fundamental stuff. Running an advertising campaign is not going to solve this. So stop spending money, make very, 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 very painful choices, and buy yourself time. Then look at your market. Don't worry about your product at this point. Product market fit is rarely about product, because essentially, if you've got a good enough problem, your product could be terrible. If it makes the problem slightly less bad, that's fine. It really is. And for those of you old enough to remember early versions of Windows, you know what? That was terrible in a lot of ways, but it meant you didn't have to work your computer from the command line. That was amazing. So, I can put up with this being slow, creaky, and crashing on a regular basis because it's so much better than what came before. So you need to look at the market. Is it big enough? Is it healthy enough? Is the market distracted by its own crises? Because if the market is having a crisis like mine was, department stores are going out of business, CEOs are losing their job, we couldn't close our deals in time before the current CEO got fired. This was a terrible place to be trying to do something that took 12 months to 18 months to close a deal. Do you understand the buying unit and the buying process enough? We didn't. We didn't understand the fundamental difference between the people that needed our solution, the people in the supply chain who were responsible for returns, and the people in finance who were responsible for profitability. They weren't the people that made a decision about buying technology. And the people buying technology weren't motivated to worry about the things that we were focused on. And so the buying unit it didn't even exist as a coherent thing. Then audit what you have. We basically put all of our tables together in the office, everybody, and we just made a big pile of what we had. Okay, well, we've got some algorithms that do this. We've got a nice front end that does this. We've got some good relationships here. We learned this thing about. We basically did it with Post-it notes and ripped up pieces of paper, and we made a big pile of what we had. And whether any of that could be recycled to solve somebody else's problem, we didn't have enough time. Ironically, there are components of that which I use in this business, particularly on some of the modeling and the maths, but we didn't have enough time to completely reinvent ourselves. We would have done 2 years earlier. And then, again, do other markets share this problem? Would any of them care enough to pay for a little bit? This is the world you're in, and ideally you do this when you've got months and months and months or even years of money as opposed to weeks. What you can do, if you're in a relatively healthy place when you're doing this, you can go right back to market identification, sizing, re-expressing your problem, reframing the problem, and seeing if you can find other markets. And good, healthy, big markets give you more options. It could be that you're making a huge shift from being a consumer-facing product to moving back down the supply chain. It could be you're going into other geographies. It could be, you've got a version aimed at manufacturers and a version aimed at retailers. Whatever it is, this gives you choices. So just to wrap up in our last kind of 5 minutes, when your business unit, startup, established company, frankly, this can happen years and years, decades in, when it isn't growing as you planned and you imagined, here are some of the things that I think might be going on. And obviously, I'm coming at this from quite a specific view of the world because I work in innovation, I work in technology, I work in software, and so I have quite a different lens to if you're in a complicated supply chain and you're manufacturing things, there can sometimes be structural or industry things going on. But I would say that's the same as number 7. You're in a terrible market or you're in a very changing market. But what's often going on when you're not growing as planned is number 4. The customer's just not that into you. They are not getting the value. They would not pull out their own credit card to make sure you didn't take their product away. They're like, yeah, this is fine, but it's not right up there in my list of priorities. And again, you might think, like, I make cakes, I make bread, I make cosmetics. They're never going to be at the top of anybody's list of priorities. I can tell you, after Brexit, I had a serious meltdown because I couldn't get my hands on a specific kind of lipstick. I had to get my mum to go with a shopping list to buy it in the UK and come on a flight to Tallinn to bring me like a little shopping list of things that I couldn't exist next week without. And at the top of the list was lipstick, and at the second on the list was moisturizer, and third on the list was a tea tree stick from Boots to make my spots less visible. So, we're not necessarily talking cures for cancer here. It's the little stuff that people get the value from and are important to them. My local bakery, there's a queue right out of the door any day of the week, any week of the year. I have thoughts on how they might be able to scale that. I mean, particularly through branding, franchising, and etc. But they are delivering very expensive bread, and the customers buying it are seeing the value. The other big thing tends to be you're in a terrible changing market. You're fishing in the wrong lake. Number 6, I don't know how well this translates. What I mean is there's 2 ponds. The pond over there has got big fat fish in, and the pond that you're fishing in, none of the fish are there. You're seeing by the side of the wrong pond. That is a nice problem on the scale of things, because actually that means you're not talking to the right people in the right way. And if you did, the fish are there. And that's probably like the least bad of all of these problems, easiest to solve. Your feedback can be coming from the wrong places. Investor feedback, board feedback, friends feedback, employees feedback is not worth the feedback of one customer who says, you know what, it's really hard for us to buy this because we don't have a budget. So you need to reframe your message to us so that it sits in a pot of money we already have so that we know how to buy you. Very common, and only your customer can tell you that. And sometimes, sadly, it's just the wrong time and the wrong money. And I think wrong market, wrong time, wrong money, that probably sums up my clear returns experience in a lot of ways. And, hey, I've learned from it. And again, just last minute, this is timed surprisingly well. As a founder, yes, you need to go fast, but not too fast. My default panic is we're not going fast enough. Somebody's going to overtake us. Somebody's going to copy us. Somebody's going to beat us to this. I don't know what. Like what are they going to beat us to? Maybe the market, but there is no magical finish line. Go fast enough. Sorry, it's my alarm clock. Go fast enough, but not too fast. Do less, right? Think more, do less, listen more than anything else. And then what you do should always be deliberate and intentional, and you know what it's for and how you're going to validate that bulk of effort, even if it's 6 months effort or 3 months effort, how are we going to validate that we're running along the right path? I personally will never raise money as early as I did from external investors. I'll never raise money so soon again. We agreed in this business we would feel that we had product market fit before we raised into external investment, mainly so that we could make the course corrections if we needed to. That may prove a mistake. You know, we may not have raised money early enough. We'll probably will raise it quite soon, but not raising it too soon does give you choices. It's always a trade-off. And if you can, you know, build your business on sales, you're not the customer. Nobody is the customer except your customer. Certainly not your investors, your teams, your friends. You want their opinion, but it really doesn't matter. And so you have to listen to your customers above everybody else. And you may not feel it whilst you are building a product. It's very easy, relatively, to create a product. It is incredibly hard to create a product that people keep buying, and then keep buying it is what makes a business. You know, they need to be renewing or buying it again. All your costs go on the first sale and acquiring a customer. And unless you've got a very clever model, business model, or unless you've got certainty that they're going to come back and buy it again and again and again, the economics of your business may not be sustainable. So that's why I think it does help to think about the world before product market fit and after product market fit, because now you're moving way, way past the first sale to the second sale, the third sale, retention, and the business economics. And that's as you start to scale and grow, that becomes really important. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not a believer in never give up. Sometimes you have to give up because sometimes you don't win. You move on. As I moved on, you learn from it and you bounce back. And I can tell you, as an entrepreneur, you get better and better and better at this every time you do it. Like, you learn across them. And so, you know, when you bounce back either into a new market, new product, new business, you know, the world's better watch out, because you are going to be amazing. And that's me done. You can, my blog is old. My blog was written in this year of in the wilderness. So it's from a very specific time, but people have found it useful in the past.
Okay, thank you, Vicky, so much for sharing with us your, I know they call these like fail stories, but I really don't like that definition, because I think this is more of a learning stories, learning opportunities. So yes, thank you for inspiring us all to be brave, but yet still be very sensible and really evaluate your risks. So there is actually some questions I would like to ask you. One of which is, I think it's a very good question, actually. So you also mentioned now that probably your market might not be ready for your product yet. So maybe you're being, I don't know, too innovative. And the need is not yet there. So how do you evaluate what you should do? Should you fall back, or should you really take the risk and move forward with your solutions?
This is a really interesting one, because this goes into the area of, do you have enough of a problem? So if the market isn't ready, in that, you know, you've created a way to get, I don't know, let's go mad and crazy. You found a cheaper way to get to Mars Like, you can get bulky material to Mars cheaper than Elon Musk or anybody else is ever going to get bulky material to Mars. And you know that in 50 years' time, there is going to be, like, you are going to be the biggest company. You have the potential to be the biggest company on the planet. Like, the problem is, are you going to have a hope in hell of existing long enough to get there? I personally would say almost certainly not, because the number of individuals on this planet that could fund that amount of work are likely to be a lot more powerful than you, and a lot more likely just to take your idea, frankly, and do it themselves. The only way you buy yourself 50 years until the market is ready for you is, you know, Microsoft didn't start as, you know, the leading software company of the planet. Of course they didn't. They solved a problem pretty badly for a company that was desperate to pay anybody, frankly, to do something. And I think unless you have got extraordinarily deep pockets, you are doing this from inside a company, and time and money doesn't matter. It's incredibly risky to think the market if the market isn't ready for me, they'll catch up, because can you survive and exist and pay your own rent and your own staff long enough for that to happen? I personally, I like a world domination plan, but I also like steps on the way that are going to get me there. So we're going to do this, and then we'll make some money. We're going to do this, and we'll make some money. And we'll do this, and then we'll have something, and we'll take this market. And it's I think they call it the bowling alley approach, which is if you've got all of these pins, you're going to bowl down, but you need to hit certain markets in certain order to take them down. You can't kind of start at the back. So I think sometimes that's a lack of understanding the market and the first 10 customers, because you need to know really and truly to raise money beyond a little bit of seed funding where people are investing in the idea. To raise money for the business, growth funding, you need to be able to say, these are the first 5 people that are going to buy it, and this is when.
So basically, maybe summing up what you just said, we could say that if you have a great idea you feel might have potential in the future, you should maybe just store it away for some better times. But then again, I guess that also depends on how far in the future we're looking at.
I would say no. I wouldn't say store it away and never do it. It's like, if you're, let's take the rocket ship to Mars, we're going to get freight cheaper to Mars. I'm not going to believe you when you put that to me in a PowerPoint presentation and ask for $100 million for your seed round so you can get started. If you can show me that you've built this little thing that's used by trash collection lorries in your neighborhood, and it compresses metal down smaller than anything else on the market, and you've built a little solution that is used by trash lorries, and you have validated, right? You have validated you can make this smaller and lighter than anybody else. And I'm not underestimating how difficult that would be, but it's like a small step. And then you go, okay, right, like we've solved this bit of problem, but we still need to strip stuff out of it. Our next market, we're going to move on from trash lorries, and we're going to go into aeroplane cargo, where weight really matters. And now we're going to find a way to show that we've built something that dramatically reduces the cost of cargo on a plane. Whoa. Now, when I'm Elon Musk and you call me about reducing the weight of my rockets, I'm interested. because you've done it. And this is about breaking it down into what's the least work? What's the least work we can do? And yeah, these things are not little work. I realize these are not little work, but they're a hell of a lot less work than, trying to convince somebody to give you 100 million to speculatively build something on a rocket that may never happen.
Yes. So although we're kind of out of time, there's still one question I would really like to ask you, because I believe it's on many tables for entrepreneurs nowadays. So because of all the geopolitical situation, right? So we understand that for many companies, the target markets might have shifted, or some of them might have closed. So maybe you do have some suggestions for these companies, how they can quickly find new target markets or pivot the existing ones.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of processes you need to do. There's the fire sale decision making. If you've got stock that's going to expire, that you're paying to store, that has a limited shelf life, the clock is ticking. So you need to look really, really fast, and you're probably in a cost recovery exercise of, can we get this somewhere else and get some of the costs back, which is operational and financial recovery rather than strategic. You've got a separate set of strategic questions probably to think about next, of the processes that we have, of the know-how we have, of our values, what we're good at, what else, who else might need this, where else might need it. And it could be that you then have to get very quickly understanding a new supply chain, the movements of goods through different markets. Okay, we hadn't thought about the Netherlands, but actually the Netherlands is where all the warehouses are. So the Netherlands might not be our target market, but actually from a supply chain or a freight world, we might need to be thinking next about getting to know the Netherlands very, very quickly. Or, we might need to be thinking about completely reorientating our public communication of our values, not some embarrassing slapping, greenwashing or slapping a flag on something and going, yeah, we're great, when you're evil, because people aren't stupid and they know that. But it's actually, it's about going back to your core. So emergency kind of comes first. Where are our people? So we've just been, we've got people still in Ukraine. So, where are your people? Where are your goods? And where are your customers right now? There's an operational cost recovery, human life management piece. But then there's a more strategic bit that starts with your core values, your core know-how, your core capabilities, and your core value proposition. And then, you can take it from there.
Mm-hmm. So still, yes, returning back, as you said, to your value proposition, and then probably validating it with your new perspective or slightly touched upon markets to still gain this traction and to keep your business afloat.
Yeah, and you talk to them, because there'll be new complexities in new sectors, in new markets, and new geographies. There's complexity and uniqueness to that locality that you won't understand. But you talk to 5 people. You don't even need to talk to 10. Talk to 5 and you'll know enough. They're the right 5.
Okay, thank you. Although I would really love to go more into this conversation, unfortunately, our time for today is over. So thank you, Vicky, once again, and so much for sharing your experience, for sharing your lessons learned. And I hope we have managed to inspire some people as well, not to be afraid also, not only to try new things and how to try them, but also to talk more openly about your own lessons learned. So thanks once again, and we will see our viewers in the next Growth Program lecture on 6th of April, when we will be diving more into understanding our customers and touching upon some tools how to actually do that. So thank you for all those who watched us today.